The move to oust CPS CEO Pedro Martinez was months in the making following turmoil between Martinez and Mayor Brandon Johnson. But despite the decision, Martinez's lawyers say they plan to take their fight to court.
The action before the board is RS1, Resolution Approving Chief Executive Officer's Dismissal.
Once the unanimous vote was cast,
6 ayes, 0 nays. This resolution is adopted by the board.
the 6-member Chicago School Board, handpicked by Mayor Brandon Johnson, left the special meeting with nothing to say except for board member Frank Thomas when I asked,
Are you concerned about a lawsuit?
No, I am not.
All I've ever asked from this board and the previous board, all I ever asked is, if you want to move on from me, just honor the terms of my contract.
Lawyers for CPS CEO Pedro Martinez telling ABC7 they plan to go to court to reverse the decision to fire him without cause. The move late Friday night comes after Martinez, who's the first Latino CPS leader, refused to take out a $300 million loan at the behest of the mayor to pay for a new Chicago Teachers Union contract.
A hand-picked group coming in right on the precipice of a newly elected board that's weeks away from being seated. So what is the rush to take the action right now? We're very disappointed by it.
That newly elected hybrid school board will be sworn in January 15th. But 6th Ward Alderman William Hall says Martinez's 3-year tenure needed to end before then.
I don't want anyone to get fired, but it's time to move on. I mean, he will be well compensated. It's in his contract. The 6th Ward needs better. I walked schools with this guy. And when we walked school, I didn't see changes.
Martinez's contract was supposed to end in June of 2026. He will now stay on through the end of this school year and be given 20 weeks worth of severance pay.
Good evening. I'm Cook County Commissioner Tara Stamps of the 1st District. And what I am so saddened by is that Chicago is comfortable with practicing educational apartheid. From Willis wagons to the strike of 1963 to the closure of 50 schools, I'm here to say that old keys will not open new doors. Pedro Martinez was entrusted with the leadership of CPS to bring stability to our schools. And yet schools on the west side, where I live, remain in constant state of crisis. How can we talk about stability when our schools continue to face chronic underfunding, crumbling infrastructure, a lack of resources for students and educators? And CPS knows how to do school. They just don't know how to do school when it's in Black neighborhoods. How can we be in the same district, and it's the tale of two districts, where on one part of town, we have some of the top rated schools in the nation. And just a half an hour down west, we have crumbling schools in the same district with the same funding. It is truly stability when West Side families are sending their children to schools with leaking roofs, outdated facilities, empty shelves. We won't talk about the lead in the pipes that impact our children's brain and ability to think and question critically. Stability isn't about maintaining the status quo, it's about addressing the root causes of inequity in our school system. If Pedro Martinez has brought stability to CPS, our West Side schools wouldn't still be grappling with the same infrastructure failures that we have endured for decades. Resource droughts that have plagued them for decades. Stability starts with investment in our schools and in our children. I believe the children are the future is not just a lyric in a song. It is the irrefutable truth. And so I say that to say that I think what is missing in this narrative is that what happens to Chicago public school children is not just the responsibility of CTU. It's not just the responsibility of even CPS. These are all of our children. So when their lives are at stake and hanging in the balance based on the disinvestment, it is everyone's responsibility. West Side schools are in desperate need of infrastructure improvements, from broken HVAC systems to buildings with unsafe conditions. These schools are a reflection of CPS's neglectful leadership. How can we ask students to succeed when their learning environment actively works against them? As many years ago, you know that environment The way a building looks, smells, feels, whether it's too hot or too cold, impacts your ability to function and do your job properly. Please understand that is the same situation when our babies come into these classrooms. How do you all expect for our children to succeed and become all that God has called them to be with leaky roofs, dirty floors, crumbling infrastructure, built doors that don't open properly, systems that don't operate properly? How can we claim to value education when we don't even provide safe and functioning spaces for our children to learn? What message are we sending to the West Side? The West Side that often gets neglected, that often gets left out, that is often the least on the list. I am here to represent that West Side. When schools don't have the tools they need, they cannot succeed. Is it any surprise that families lose faith in CPS when their children are consistently underserved and their needs are consistently ignored? How can we ask students to succeed when their learning works against them? Resources, equity is a basic expectation for any school system, but it has been ignored on the West Side. Pedro Martinez's leadership has left these schools in a drought, and our students and teachers are paying the price for that. In closing, as someone who represents the West Side, I know the potential of our students. I know the dedication of our educators. What we lack isn't talent or drive or passion or seriousness, it's leadership that fights for our schools and our children, that prioritizes our children, that prioritizes our children, that prioritizes our children. Pedro Martinez has failed to bring stability, address infrastructure needs, or prioritize the West Side in any way. It is time for CPS to move forward with a leadership that understands the urgency of now, and that these challenges and these fights for the schools that our children deserve.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm here today to essentially tell the truth. A week ago in my ward, helicopters over school. A week ago in my ward, kids were put in classrooms and locked down like prisoners. In my ward, 6th ward, students couldn't leave because the school was on lockdown and didn't get home until around this time a week ago. The interesting thing about this is that these kids are supposed to go to school, but this feels like, seems like, and looks like prison. Kids are going to school with dreams, but are leaving with nightmares. I find it hard that this school is named Inglewood STEM, where my father taught at Robeson. By the way, Principal Morrow should have never been fired. Nevertheless, this school looks like kids are being prepared for prison instead of possibilities and dreams. I call this a prison pipeline experiment. How do we have a school named Inglewood STEM? There's no STEM teacher. How do we have Inglewood STEM and the current principal is having to figure out how to rob Peter to pay Paul to get buses for kids to go to sporting events, after school programs, and find money for a STEM program that's literally non-existent? So if you take away all of these resources in neighborhoods where kids don't have hospitals, kids don't have grocery stores, the #1 economy is selling drugs, you tell me that that's not a pipeline for prison. When Pedro had a chance to go to the state, and the same way we're using all of this public money for PR stunts, instead of using that effort with support to stop prisons from being built, which used the scores of these Inglewood kids, we chose to do nothing. And so I ask all of these board members tonight that when you go back to your comfortable homes, when you rest your head on your pillows, think about the kids that had to experience prison-like conditions. We are preparing children for prison and not jobs. So my question today is, how long are we going to continue to traumatize students and teachers? Teachers are heroes, not villains. And at the end of the day, we have essentially demonized teachers for requesting basic things that they need to teach well under his watch. And so to continue the course of this prison pipeline production, no funding, adequate funding for schools, no real state agenda, in addition to being afraid, and I get it, board members, you're afraid or you might be concerned because we've seen this stuff from this guy before. He's been to places and been fired and sued board members, walked away with $800,000 and setting the stage for a repeat of what he did when he was at his last job. So I implore you all to stand on your faith and your courage to make sure that when we look at Inglewood STEM, that's the only case study you need, that we don't continue to repeat this cycle that has failed Black kids and linked them only to prison cells instead of jobs that we say that we're going to give them once they leave school. When you go home tonight, when you rest your head on your pillows, think about the fact that these children are not only afraid to go to school, but they ain't learning when they get there. Did Pedro take none of the tests? No, but he signed off on a budget that didn't get them the teachers to teach them right. So I say, as I get ready to take my seat, that we can talk about all of this destabilization, talking points, so forth and so on. But that's what's really destabilizing schools. What's really destabilizing schools is the fact that these children don't really have a chance. We done closed schools before. We built new prisons on their watch. And at the end of the day, we have
30 seconds remaining.
that we are defending them. I ask that we take a serious approach at looking at what does the future look like for Black kids in poor neighborhoods. And before you answer that question, ask yourself the question, did we give everything we could from the leadership down to the janitor? And if the answer is no, then I say tear it all up and build it the right way. God bless you.
The next elected official is Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez from the 24th Ward, who is here in person.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Good evening to the board. Can I get my time back? Thank you. Thank you to the board members, and good evening, everybody, for being here. First, let me thank the parents, the teachers, and our school communities for courageously again fighting against the school closures when others have looked the other way yet again. My sincere thanks to the Acero parents for their courageous and steadfast advocacy to protect the right of their children and the children and our students across the city of Chicago. The applauses are to those parents. When we talk about fiscal responsibility and some of those elected officials that are quite honestly out of touch from the reality of our communities, how can we talk about fiscal responsibility when our several administrators are putting $46 million in reserves and telling our parents that 2,000 children will be left without a school by the end of June of next year? How are we going to tell our parents, or students, or teachers that we have to wait to take action because of the political expediency of a few that continue to neglect the children of the most vulnerable communities? You heard today from parents that pass. I have 2 schools that are about to close in Pilsen and Little Village. Those children need and deserve your advocacy. They need and deserve adults coming to the table to really truly deliver on stability, for our neighborhoods. I've been reading these op-eds of politicians have been members of the board or interims, CEOs, who look the other way when 50 schools close in the poorest areas of the city of Chicago. Where was the stability then? Where was the stability then? Some of them continue to use inflammatory language to refer at individual contracts for one individual as a massacre. That was certainly a massacre of our students when 50 schools closed and politicians looked the other way. Where was the call for stability? Where was the call for fiscal responsibility then? When it comes to our schools, when it comes to the poor, we see politicians coming in droves to talk. But we come to our schools and our students, on our kids, then we see the people standing together. You see parents, you have students, and you have teachers standing together to protect our student communities, to defend us for the violence, the systemic violence, to indeed use state dollars to developers when our students are starved of state dollars. $2.3 billion to developers in 2019. Where were these people that are now calling for fiscal responsibility? Our schools, our children first. I'm not ashamed of standing up here with our parents, with our children, because public education is a right. And we're going to be here not because it's politically convenient, because our communities urgently need you to take action. We cannot wait more months for some to decide that it's convenient then to take action, because it becomes politically convenient. Because today we need you to take a steady action, to see real leadership. We said it loud and clear that we need action, not platitudes and words to protect our student communities. And we are here yet again, months after that. Our parents, our students, our teachers are not the enemy. Are those millionaires and corporations who continue to use our school districts as a sacred cow.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Those are the people who are writing in newspapers and trying to manipulate us. Our communities are today together to stop the school to prison pipeline. We are together to make sure that our kids can dream, that our kids can have a public education. And that's what we need to make sure that you vote today for changes in leadership, for changes in CPS, for changes that keep our schools open to make sure that our kids have a right to dream. And a Karen Lewis said, are these decisions make us stronger? Are they united us?
Please
Are these
conclude your
decisions-
remarks.
Then you have the decision that is right for our communities. The rest is politics as usual. It is time to act. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
Congratulations, President Harden. Good to see you, brother. All right. My name is G2 Brown. I am a proud son of Henry Local Community Organization. I'm also a national director of Journey for Justice Alliance. And as was just stated, I'm recently elected to serve on the first elected school board representing the 5th district. Right, along with my sister Mikaya. We're going to split it up. All right, so this is my second board meeting since 2014. Because in 2014, I swore off coming to places like this. Because I have sat with innumerable numbers of parents who were traumatized by decisions made by people who were not impacted by those decisions. I drive Rosemary and Ray in tears when they closed Lafayette Elementary School and her and her family occupied the school. I stood with parents at Carpenter Elementary, a good elementary school that was closed for real estate. I stood with the parents at Price. I did programs at Douglas Elementary. When we went at Douglas, it was 600 babies in that school. And now because of district actions, there are 34 children in that school. And a white ran a voucher school across the street and closed Key wants Douglas as the feeder school. So I would say this to you as a board. ignore the noise. We have people. I want you to dream a world-class K-12 grade system of education. There's never been a commitment from a board like this to do right by Black and brown children. There's never been. I know more than most people in this room. I have stood and I'm proud of her. But one thing I've been out with old folks. If I understand everything correctly, I've seen good schools sabotage. I've seen parents think at school board meetings and board members, David Princeton sitting on the board, great grandchildren not gonna have to work. And they make decisions about children that look like me. Right? So for the parents have a settle. Parents go through when they're being told that their school is a failure and they don't know. I know the incident. I know the price. And I'm gonna say something to the audience. Stop saying 50 schools. They have closed over 160 schools. That is state-sponsored sabotage. And I say we have a righteous purpose. And that righteous purpose is to look at the commercial club and say, you no longer have a place. Right? All right? Because the commercial club wrote the plan to close 100 schools to criticize the team. So when people are making noise, when Paul Wallace is making noise, when Arnie Gilpin is making noise, when Weber is making noise, I want you to understand and consider the story. Paul Wallace should never be able to hold public office. A society that is not invested in young people betrays itself. So when I walk on the west side now, I look those young people in the eye and I got a duty to do. How do I call myself? President Park, when they tried to close Wallace 3 times, and those parents came and had to fight for 6 months to say this. Nobody should have to go through that. So I'm saying to you, and I wrote my stuff down, but I didn't want to say, I want to say, respect.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
All right. Respect. Barbara Bird Bennett was really loud road. Arnie Duncan, John Clark Lazard, Michelle Green, these people that are prepared to tear down public school systems, that's where they learn. The privatization movement has its own infrastructure. Where is our infrastructure for equity? Where is our infrastructure for equity? And so, I'm saying you, sisters and brothers, ignore the door, yeah, work. And please consider the source. And the work that you got to do for a settle is urgent. You don't tell me. You don't tell me. You don't tell me.
Please conclude your remarks.
I got you. Last thing I'm saying. In 2014, I was in Wallace Elementary. They had just closed Overton for land. Because Overton for 2 straight years had 2 of the largest centers of test score improvements in the city of Chicago. Right? The late great Karen Lewis was doing a book group at Wallace. I'm standing in the gym room, and 30 to 40 primary age students come to me, grab my pants leg, and they're crying. And they missed the G2. Are they going to reopen Overton? I want to say that to you, and I'm asking you to hear me with your heart. See, it doesn't matter how professional we are. What matters is, are we believers? Are we believers? I'm a believer. I believe in the beauty and the brilliance of our babies. I've lived my life according to that rule. And that's going to be our mandate. It's now and as of January 15th. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
The most legitimate existence of anyone in this country is the legitimate existence of a black man. About as long as I've been live. So, also improve special education services. I will just say, as I finish my comments, the most legitimate existence of anyone in this country is the legitimate existence of a black man. Now, I understand that there are individuals that wish to use this as a political opportunity to sow seeds of doubt. But make no mistake about it, I am going to stand firm and flat-foot to ensure that our students get what they deserve. Because, just for the record, I was legitimate when I took an arrest against other administrations when they were closing down black schools. I was also legitimate when I went down to Springfield to fight for a fully elected school board. As you can tell, that they clearly expect a black man to do everything in less than 2 years. But I will say this, though. I do appreciate the energy. I do. Because I do know that if things were still, it would mean that we are moving in status quo. But the fact that things are moving and shifting, it means I'm doing exactly what I was elected to do.